Hi, everybody. Joining to us today is Ron Carucci, a co-founder and managing partner at Neverland. He's a globally well known for his work in honesty and strategy to transform organizations' leadership. So thank you so much, Ron, for spending your time with us here, sharing about your work, your passion, and career in helping organizations to be more successful. And we are all curious and exciting to hear more about you. Would you please share with us a bit about yourself and also take us back to the journey how all of these great work started?
Sure. Well, Vivian and Ha, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be with you and great to sort of connect across the globe and keep our worlds connected. So I'm the managing partner of a boutique firm called Navalent, and we're a small community of very seasoned change and leadership practitioners. And we spend our days walking alongside executives who are in the middle of some very messy, difficult, complicated change. Whether it's a change they've had to initiate to grow their divisions or their companies, or whether it's some headwinds from the marketplace or some challenges they're facing. And our job is to sort of construct the journey, the roadmap for how to get through that. We recognize that systems change in complicated ways, and many consultants or coaches come in and they pull one lever. They do a reorg, or they work on the leadership training, or they put in new technologies, or they change the values. Of course, the problem is those fail because they don't change the entire system. And we recognize that change has to happen for it to stick, has to happen within the leader, has to happen between the leader and those they lead and the other divisions they have to coordinate with. And it has to happen systemically. It has to happen culturally. It has to happen in governance. It has to happen sometimes in structure, and often has to happen in strategy. And so we call that within, between, among, where change has to happen. And you could do two of those brilliantly, but if you do one of them poorly, your change will still fail. And we know that. Clients and companies have come to rely on us because we understand how to work on all three of those areas at the same time. That's what makes change so hard. And that's why 70% of changes fail, because people try and do it in bite-sized chunks. They want to make it easier. They want to make it faster. They want things that aren't possible to have. And many consultants will just go along with them and promise them what they want to hear. And you have a very bifurcated market. You have the coaches working on the leadership. You have the team builders working on the team. You have the strategy folks working on the strategy, and the org designers working on the org design. And it's like those people who get cosmetic surgery so much, they look like this when they're done. You know, and that's what your organization ends up looking like when you nip and tuck at it in all these ways. And performance, the growth you wanted, the new customers you wanted, the new margins you wanted, isn't coming. So we accompany leaders because we understand their world. We understand what they have to remit to their enterprises, to their boards of directors, to their shareholders. And we can construct journeys that allow for all three of those areas of change to actually happen. And it's extremely exciting work, and it's a privilege. We get to see leaders in their most exciting moments, in their worst moments, in their most struggling moments, in their private pain moments. And we're the safe place they come to. Many of our clients have been with us I'm working with one enterprise right now who's been a client for 12 years. We're on our second or third CEO there now. And because we're the firm that they call to when they need real help. One of the leaders there, this is a little bit of an American metaphor, but one of the leaders there was talking to another client referral of ours. And he said, there's time for the Navy, and then there's time for the Navy SEALs, and then there's time for SEAL Team 6. And SEAL Team 6 is this team that went and killed Osama bin Laden. They're just the special SEAL team. He said, yes. The Navy is like McKinsey. The Navy SEALs are like, the really high end, whatever. And then Navalent is SEAL Team 6. And he said, you have to know when you need them. You don't need them all the time, but when you need them, that's who you call. And it was obviously a very great compliment for him to see us that way. And he actually showed this chart over the last 12 years in this company, a lot of leaders have come and gone. And he showed he actually presented of all the projects we've done, and how after every single project, revenue, profitability, and growth went up. And so when some of the folks were saying, why have you worked with them for so long? Because they were new to the company, he said, when you're batting 1,000, why would you change? So it's a, it's an, and we see that very humbly. I mean, that's not, we work really hard, but the thing that most sets us apart isn't just because we're good at what we do. It's because we care so deeply about the leaders we work with. Their success becomes our success. We're the ones they call at 2 a.m. when they're having a crisis in their head. We're the ones they call on weekends when they're getting ready for a big meeting on Monday. And we take their calls because we shine when they shine. We stay in the background. We're not the ones out in front. We are a small army that is meant to help them be successful. So we don't ever, we're sort of in the background, working like their, secret sauce. But ultimately, our job is to make them successful to their people, to their customers, to their regions. And it's a privilege. It's an incredible privilege to wake up every day and get to sit in these very sacred places with
Wow.
leaders and to help them achieve ambitions that they were never sure they could achieve.
Wow. Thank you, Ron, for introducing about you and the work as your organization. We would want to bring you all the way back to your own story when you first started your career, because we would want to find the secret sauce of what makes Ron be successful and the way that you are today, right? So can you tell us, because when I look at years ago, we did not know what major did you study and how did you fall in love with organizational change, and how's everything started at the beginning?
When I was a little kid, I was always fascinated by organizing human endeavor, bringing people together to do something that individuals couldn't do. I was the kid that organized the stickball game in the neighborhood. I was the kid that wanted to organize the school events. I was the one that wanted to bring people together for great parties and events or organize big fundraisers. And I don't think I understood then why it was I loved seeing that wow, human beings could come together from many different places and accomplish things that individuals couldn't accomplish, but it was breathtaking to watch. And over time, I learned that I tried a variety of different careers. I actually began my career in the arts long before way back when I was coming out of college. And but that was boring. I was bored with that. It wasn't really interesting to me. And I was working in Europe. And so, traveling to different countries, and the military and the State Department and the governments had contracts with us to go do workshops and training. And I'm in my very early 20s, and this is before Europe reunified. We were at Dachau, in the chapel at Dachau. And there was Americans, and there were Germans, and there were civilians and military, and a very mixed group of people. And we all understood that we're in this place of love that's situated in this place of hate. And they didn't have the words diversity and inclusion back then, but that's what this would have been called if they did. And in the middle of the workshop, a young American soldier stood up and he said, "I'm just so tired of being trained to hate." And I remember thinking, how did something we do up here make him think that? I was fascinated. We processed the conversation. It was a very beautiful conversation. But I wanted to know more. And so afterwards, I said, "Hey, can you have time?" So we're in Munich. Everybody drinks beer. So let's go out for a beer. And we stayed out late. And I wanted to hear more about his story. I wanted to hear more about what he was thinking and what he was wrestling with. And he probably wasn't more than a few years older than me. And I think that's the point I realized, wow, telling great stories is interesting, but engaging people in their story, that's fascinating. And that would never get boring. And I think that's where I began to turn my career. I came back to the United States and found out that there's a whole field called organizational psychology, and that you can train in it. And it's a body of work and people do it. And I just got very excited, and that's 35 years ago, and I've never lost the excitement since. Early in my career, I spent a lot of my days working inside large companies. Unfortunately, because it was new in my career, I didn't have all the skills I needed to be politically savvy. I just assumed people had me there because they actually wanted improvement. They actually wanted things to get better. So I would just blurt out things and say things that I saw, and sometimes those were not politically convenient for people. And so I kept getting in trouble inside big companies. And when I go outside companies and work as an independent consultant, I realized the same behavior that got me in trouble inside companies got me paid really well outside companies. I thought, huh, I guess if I'm going to live out my passion for organizations, it's going to have to be by not being part of one. And so I went the consulting route to be stay at the outsider. You know, ancient wisdom says you can't be a prophet in your own land. And so I began my career in the consulting world, and went to this wonderful, wonderful firm in New York City that only worked with CEOs. So it was a place I could learn how to really shape and architect transformational change, and working with his senior executives, the people who shape the future. And I spent about 8 years there. And the owner of the firm, a wonderful forefather in my field who founded it, sold it to a very large consulting firm. And then it stopped being fun, because once you're in a very large consulting firm, your responsibilities to sell and bring in revenue and feed people take you away from the work. And we still love I still love the work. And so one of the partners there and I said, hey, we can go do this on our own. We don't need to, we've now learned how to do this. We don't need to. And we never said, let's go start a firm. We just said, let's go do this on our own. So we were very accidental entrepreneurs. We quickly realized that if we were going to do the same kind of work, we needed help. And so when we left to start Navalent 17 years ago, we quickly realized we're going to have more people here if it's going to work. And so we've now grown our family. And ever since, we've had a remarkable 17 years of lots of lives being changed, lots of companies being changed, certainly making our own mistakes and learning as we went. It wasn't always perfect, but it's been an incredible gift. When I think about all the faces over all the years whose lives we got to be part of, or whose stories we got to be part of for a season, and how those stories changed because we were together.
Wow. We admire what you do, Ron. And still, I need to know I and the audience would like to know the secret sauce, because there's many organizational psychologists out there. There's many people working in the field of organization change and transformation. But from here, from their level to your level, what makes you different?
That's such a funny question, How, because we're answering that question now for our marketplace, because you're right, there are so many practitioners. The field when I began my career, it wasn't the case, but in the last 20 years, the field has just proliferated terribly. And honestly, some of the practitioners are not good. Some of them are good, but some of them are terrible. I think there's a couple of things that set us apart. One is our passion and our care. We invest ourselves so deeply in the success of our clients. Our experience base, right? There's over 100 years of experience in our firm. So our pattern library, what we've seen in terms of the kinds of challenges companies face, the kinds of behavioral difficulties leaders face with their teams, the kinds of cultural toxins that companies have to remove. We've seen so much, and we have, we don't ever have off-the-shelf solutions. We customize everything we do for the context, because the context is everything. And so, how one company solves the same problem in Vietnam is not going to be the same way that the company solves it in London, even if it's the same problem. So the third thing I would say then is our diagnostic lens. The way we do our diagnostic work, the way we excavate insights and data from a system is very unique. It's proprietary, and we extract tons of insights and data, and then we code it. We put it through a software program, and we actually code the data to create a very rich and complete story about the current state of the organization. And we hear things that leaders would never have access to. And they get it all back. They hear everything we heard. They don't know who said it, because it's all coded in a story. but they get to hear things sometimes that are painful to hear, that they would never hear. They get all of the truth. So they get to make then fully informed choices that they wouldn't otherwise make, because most of them are making decisions based on partial data or interpretations, or the closer people are to them, the more they're telling them what they want to hear, not the real truth. And so we hear things and can bring back things in our diagnosis that they would never hear. And then we can work with them to make sense of it. The thing that we do that's very different than other consultants is we don't go in with the answer. We don't go say, here's the diagnosis and here's what you should do. We go in and say, here's the diagnosis, what do you think it means? And we facilitate because psychologically, if they don't own the story, they won't want to change the story. Most consultants want to own the story because they want the work. And we don't, that's not our job. Our job is to make the story go well. And so we spend sometimes a day and a half or 2 days in a room locked with that senior team around that data, forcing them into it and forcing them to have conversations with each other and to say things and to make sense of that data. And once they have done that, then we'll say, okay, here's our point of view. As outsiders, we've seen this many times. Here's what we think it says. And of course, there's always a lot of alignment there. Sometimes we may say something a little bit sharper or a little spotlight a particular thing that more than they did. But for the most part, they have now ground themselves in their own story, and they now own it. And they're now committing to actions, whether it's about their own leadership or their team or their organization. They're owning it. Now, any insights I offer are to supplement their conclusions, to strengthen their plan. It's not, here's my plan, and now you have to adapt it. And that's a very, very important difference. When consultants come in with an answer, it's their answer. And the clients are happy to say, great, go implement your answer and let me know what you need from me. Which of course is why they always fail, because it's not mine. And so we will always get out of the way to make sure the answer, the sense making, the psychological process of dealing with the pain and the hurt and the shock and the fear and the excitement of what that story is telling me is always the leaders. And until we see that moment happen, we're not going to be part of it. Our job is to create the conditions in which that can happen, not to go in and prevent it from happening by giving them our answer. So by the end of that diagnostic process, there's a clear plan, a clear set of priorities, and a leadership team or a leader that owns that plan. And then we can say, okay, how do you want to execute this plan? And sometimes they need our help for that, and sometimes they don't. There's always something we can help them do better, but our job is to make sure that you have the honest truth and the honest story and the full story about what's happening around you, how people see you, how people see your organization, what they're telling themselves, and also all the conflicting data, right? Marketing thinks this, operations thinks this. Sales thinks this, North America thinks this. And all those dueling narratives, right? You have to have them all because they're not dueling randomly. They're dueling for a reason. And there is some need that conflict serves in the system. And you have to understand what that is if you're going to resolve it. You can't just say, hey, work this out, or okay, you win, you lose, which is what leaders will often do. And they make things worse. Because they don't know what lever they're not seeing. They don't know what data they don't have. They just know the data that's in front of them. And often it's the person screaming loudest, or it's their favorite, or it's the person that's most like them, or it's the person they think is the highest performer, getting their way. And they're reacting to things with very incomplete data and sometimes faulty data. And which of course, then, they put a big Band-Aid in place over the pain, and then 8 months later, it's worse. They try and change one behavior to meet one set of stakeholders' needs, only to piss off a whole other set of stakeholders because the behavior now doesn't work, because they didn't have all the data. And I think that's the problem with the pure executive coach who only focuses on the leader and not their context. Because if I focus on your behavior, for example, if you're my client, the set of behaviors that might make you successful in Vietnam as a leader running a multinational region could cause you to fail in Europe. The same behavior. If I don't understand the context of what's culturally expected of you, what's financially expected of you, what's from what multiple stakeholders expect from you, I can't help you make trade-offs. Because at a senior level, I'm going to have lots of stakeholders. I'm going to have people in another part of the world who are my parent company. I'm going to have customers in my region. I'm going to have suppliers in my region. I'm going to have suppliers somewhere else. I'm going to have my employees. I'm going to have my direct reports, and I'm going to have their direct reports. And at any given time, I'm going to be disappointing somebody. And if I don't know who I'm disappointing and why, and if I'm not intentional about saying, I recognize that this decision to solve this problem for this stakeholder is probably going to make them upset. And I understand that, and then I know what to go and do to prevent it. Then I can do that. But if I don't, if I'm not thought that through, if nobody's giving me data to help me think through, how do I weigh that trade-off? And in this culture, what's the way I do that so that I don't, I don't imbalance the ship? Then I'm going to be reacting to things all the time.
Ron, it brings me back to when you were working as the seasoned consultant, and then you gave your clients the honest feedback when you were internal, and it didn't work well for you, right? But then when you work at Neverland and and then work with the leaders and giving them the honest feedbacks and let them figure the issue out, and then it working, right? Is that something that leading to the book that you wrote, to be honest?
So To Be Honest was my 9th book. We didn't set out to write a book hop. I wanted to know, we have this incredible data set. We have this 15 years of data that we've collected that with great artificial intelligence, we can go analyze. So for our book, Rising to Power, the last book we did, we had 10 years of data. And that was all about, we've known for 20 years that executives who go from the middle to the top, that transition, that more than 60% of them fail within 18 months. And that became very personal for me when we realized it was happening to our clients that we were helping. And it was frustrating. And we didn't understand, why was it so acceptable that we roll the dice on people's careers? And, I wanted to know, what do we do? What's happening in the system that is causing that? It happened because one of the CEOs we worked with for many, many years in 2 companies, in one big transformation, one of the guys in the org change work, it was a great guy. It was a Chinese American man, brilliant, loved by everybody. Everybody just assumed, of course, he's going to go very far. So in the new design, when he got a very big job, everybody was like, of course, that's wonderful. 9 months later, I saw him on my caller ID, and I thought, oh, it's David. He's calling to let me know how things are going and all the great things he's done. And he called to tell me he'd been fired and he needed some help networking. I thought a wrecking ball had hit me. And 2 hours later, the CEO called and said, we had to let him go. And frankly, some of that's your responsibility because you didn't prepare him enough for that job, which of course, nobody wants to hear that. I said, could I come back in on my own time and just find out what happened here? How could we have so badly misjudged somebody's potential? So we went back in and started this underground test to see what went wrong here. And that experiment, or that little investigation, is what led to our 10-year study to say, is this happening everywhere? Are we taking incredibly talented leaders and setting them up to fail? So we spent, years working this data to uncover what could have gone wrong. And we did. We learned what went wrong with him. Turns out there are so many landmines that organizations put in the way of these leaders. I went back to the CEO and I said, I will take responsibility for not warning him about all the landmines he was going to face as he rose up to that job. You take responsibility for putting him there. And it was fair. And then we wrote the book Rising to Power, because I didn't want, it was so heartbreaking to watch somebody so gifted and so with so much potential. By the way, his career has gone on to be spectacular. He's doing great. He's actually running a company now. But I thought, we have to stop this waste. This is wasting careers. People move their families. They upend their whole lives to go take on bigger jobs. We have to stop. We have to make them successful. And I wanted to make sure we turned over every single rock that could have possibly derailed them. The thing we did in the data was we were also able to isolate, okay, well, if half of them are failing, what are the other half doing? If people are rising up and sticking the landing and doing well, what are they doing? Could we figure that out? And sure enough, we were able to work the data to isolate 4 patterns that were consistently displayed by executives who rose up to bigger jobs and actually succeeded. So we can not only help people prevent the typical failures of ascent to bigger jobs, we also can show them, here's the 4 things you have to do really well to make sure you thrive. And that was a very exciting book to write. I just got a note this past Sunday from a leader telling me that I met him, but he said, this book changed my life. It changed my career. He's running a healthcare business. He said, and it changed how I see the world. And he was just want me to say thank you for that. So that was exciting. So then 6 years later, we thought, okay, so in that data at 10 years, we isolated for individual behavior. What if we went back into that data now? That was 2,700 interviews. Now we have 3,200 interviews. Thousands of people. Could we learn anything about the system, about the context of the organizations that might be shaping good behavior or not good behavior? And we thought, well, this time, let's go in without a hypothesis. If the technology is so intelligent, if the artificial intelligence is that good, let's ask it, what should we be asking you? And it came back with all, we fed it in all this data. It came back with these, what we call drill sites, like go look here. We think there's something here. And one of them was on honesty. One of them was on the integrity issue of truth telling and what happens when it happens and what prevents it. And I thought, oh my gosh, that could be really compelling. So we went back and drilled there to find out what we could learn. And in fact, we found 4 conditions in which organizations with people, you can predict with great accuracy whether people will tell the truth and behave fairly and serve a greater good, and under what conditions they'll lie and they'll cheat and they'll serve their own interests first. And when we found that, we thought, well, that's compelling. And it's scary and also exciting. And so I said, let's write the book. But it wasn't until I saw what we had learned that made me want to do that.
So what is that 4 things, CB, if you can share 1 or 2 with us?
Well, one of them is, so for example, we call it a clear identity. Be who you say you are. So all of our organizations have promises we make in our mission statements, in our vision statements, in our values, in our brand purpose statements. Well, it turns out those are, people have an implied expectation that those are lived reality. But how many companies do you look where you say the values and people just roll their eyes, right? They're not real. Well, it turns out that if you are aligned, if your actions and words match, if people in fact are expected to live out what those words say, you're 3 times more likely to have people tell the truth and behave fairly and serve a greater good. But if they don't match, if those words are just for cosmetic purposes only, you've now institutionalized duplicity. You've said to the organization, around here, it's okay to say one thing but do another. So now that's what they can do. They know those words don't mean anything. And so now you are now 3 times more likely to have people be dishonest. Because you've given, in your own actions, you've given them permission to do that.
So that means that leaders at all levels has to demonstrate that.
Absolutely. And the question I ask my clients all the time is, if somebody followed you around for a day with a video camera and videoed you just for a regular day in your life, could they use that video as a training program for your values? Or would it be an embarrassment to use it? Would it teach people how not to live out the values? What leaders should do is every few months or a few times a year, bring those promises, the mission, the purpose, anyone, bring one of them, put it onto a table around your team and ask the team, how are we doing? Are we living by this? How am I doing? Am I an example you're proud to follow of these values? Or am I a complete contradiction? And have honest conversations about that. Because if you want them telling you the truth, and I recognize that in cultural regions of your part of the world, truth telling to people in higher power, high levels of power is a much higher bar than it is in the West. I understand that. It doesn't mean it can't happen. It just means leaders have to work harder to make it safer for that. Because here's the thing. People are telling stories about you as a leader. They are discussing problems about your organization somewhere. If you don't have access to that data, if people are not coming into your office several times a week telling you something that makes you uncomfortable, your leadership is not good. Because they're going home and telling their families. Every night around a dinner table in Vietnam, there are stories being told about you. If you don't know what stories are being told, then you should be worried.
Well, Ron, look, I look at it as the in my own experience. Let's say the leader, the CEO, the chairman in the headquarters have a vision of the company and be role model. It goes to the regional for like let's say Europe or Asia, and it goes to sub region, let's say Southeast Asia, and then it goes to the country level. And along the way, there might be a possibility of the like the vision being miscommunicated, is misinterpreted, or is misused. How do the leader on top be able to pull the leader underneath up and live up to the values though?
Very, very good question. It's a great question, Han. Here's the thing. A lot of those leaders, I think, are well-intended. I think they believe in the values, but they're not trying. I mean, most of them aren't trying to fool people to make them think, we want you to think this, but we're not really like that. But that's dangerous, right? Believing in your good intentions is dangerous because between our intentions and our impact, there's always a gap. And if you think that just because I think it's good, it's cascading down, and there's no accountability for that, of course you're going to have major dilution as you go down, right? And major dissonance between what the words say or how they're interpreted and what actually happens. And the minute you tolerate somebody behaving outside those values because they're a great salesperson, they drive revenue, they're a brilliant engineer, they have great ideas, they can develop products, because of their performance, you have now said results are more important than those values. So results are mandatory, values are discretionary. You've now announced that by tolerating one person's misconduct or bad behavior or lack of skill for what you've said the whole organization has to bring. You've now said it's voluntary. We like it if you have it, but if you don't worry. Well, so how does that work, right? And so if you are not vigilant about saying these values are sacrosanct, these values are so critical that even if you get good results, if you violate them, we'll give you grace, we'll help you. But if you keep violating them, you're out. Otherwise, how do people take them seriously? And people are hungry to believe in a greater good. They want to feel part of a bigger purpose, of a bigger story. Those words tell the bigger story that they're part of. And if that story is fake, or if they believe that story is fake, your best talent will quit and leave. And your mediocre talent, they'll quit and stay.
Well, long ago, I had a big debate with a few CEOs here in Vietnam, and because I don't believe in the structure that you send somebody to come and be running the GM roles for a few 3-4 years, then establish the vision, the strategy, and then when and then that person has a second agenda to go into another region, go into another role. So the culture is not yet established, another one already coming in, and the strategy is not yet delivered, and another person already coming in, and so it makes the food on the table is never well cooked for the people. So the people below the line here are always struggle with the structure, with the directions, with the integrity and the honest. I can say the honest because when I first come, I say, hey, as a CEO, here's how we're going to run the company. And then 4 years later, another one to come and do it differently. So as the top layer, how do you think that, organization should be running, especially in the new normal, like right now? to engage the employees, then build the honesty that people believe, trust, and engage.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, in the world you're describing,
Mm,
it's very clear that leaders are committed to their own ambitions, right? They're there for their own agenda. They're shaping the strategy around them,
mm,
not around what the region requires or what the region can perform. They're not thinking about the people, right? And so my guess is that the people below them, the locals, have become conditioned, and they're like, this too shall pass. We've seen them come, we've seen them go. And so they don't ever take the changes seriously because they're
mm,
like, yep, seen it. We call that the this too shall pass club,
mm,
because I know what's going to happen in 4 years. I've seen this now. He's my fourth one, right? So you're training the people to sort of be spectators in their own story
mm,
because the story is all about you. So I totally agree with you that when multinationals parachute in
mm,
people from outside to rather than developing local talent, it's dangerous. What's the point if you're going to have an Asia Pacific region?
mm,
You need an Asian Pacific leader to run it. You can't send in somebody from Europe or North America or Latin America to run that. I don't.
mm,
If you really want to do business in the Asia Pacific region, then do business in the Asia Pacific region. Don't dabble in it, right?
mm,
And decide what does the role that business plays in your overall global portfolio. If it's just operations or supply chain, if it's just, then fine, just be that. But don't try and be something you're not to the
mm,
region, because first of all, you're just exploiting all the people that are there for
mm,
their labor or for them, and not really treating them as if they're part of the story. And second of all, if it's just to sort of create global GMs, they just want to parachute people in to train them for a few years and then send them on somewhere else. That's terrible.
yes.
And just as you said, it doesn't work. I've never seen it work.
Mm,
And I've never seen somebody come out of one of those assignments better.
mm,
They're scarred and they're tired,
mm,
and they might know a little bit of the local language, but they're not any better of a leader.
mm.
They're certainly not any better of a GM.
So who takes the blame for that if organization had GMs parachute into countries like that?
Usually they blame HR. But the problem is, and they'll say, well, he accomplished this, but he didn't accomplish this, or she accomplished this, and they'll sort of do a report. But again, context matters, right? So it's not about that individual leader. If the system is cycling through leaders in a region, and there's no consistent strategy for the role that region plays in your global portfolio, what those customers want, what those manufacturing facilities want, what those employees need, and there's not the strategy cannot be leader dependent. If the
Mm,
strategy is totally dependent on the leader's vision, it's not a strategy. It's a hobby.
mm, I see.
And so if when that leader extracts themselves, the whole thing falls apart and we have to have somebody start over again, the problem was context. It wasn't that leader.
Mm,
The leader that can create a system and a strategy and a vision and anchor it to the region and its remit to the global enterprise, to the global customers or to the regional customers, and leave and have it still keep going and tell you this is the kind of person that needs to follow me to make it keep going. That's leadership. That's real growth. But
mm,
a lot of times you look at a region where it's just a revolving door of people, and it's been a region for 15 years, but they don't have 15 years of experience. They have 3 years of experience 5 times.
got it. Yeah.
And I just, that's terrible. And they just keep doing it. And whenever I'm asked to work in those kinds of areas, I'm like, help me understand why you keep doing this. And I'm the first person that's asked. I'm like, look at 15 years of data that say this is not getting any better. And it has nothing to do with the leaders you're putting in there.
Mm,
It has everything to do with why you're putting them in there, and they don't understand why they're going there. So it's a stop on the train for their career.
mm,
Is this region strategically important to your global strategy or not? And if so, how is it important? What role does this play? Maybe it's a loss leader. Maybe it's a region that is meant to lose money just in the service of other customers. Maybe it's a cash cow. Maybe it's a low margin, high volume business. Maybe it's a
mm,
high margin, low volume business. Maybe it's to have access to certain suppliers. You have to have a presence here. Well, it could be anything. Those are legitimate reasons to have a location someplace, but many
mm,
companies aren't honest about it. They don't want to say it's a loss leader. They don't want to say it's just because we want access to these suppliers or we want access to these ports. And so they try and make up a reason. And when a leader can come in and dress up a big vision and a strategy, whatever, to make it look like it's more than it really is, nobody's fooled. Everybody in the region knows, but they all know it. And so now I got to play the game. I have to make it look like your vision is real, even though I know what we're really here for. But now people feel shame.
If the leader in the region would want to give that honest feedback and be, and raise that feedbacks upward, right? How can leaders on top be able to create an environment that help receiving feedbacks and honor it though?
Excellent question, huh? Here's the thing. If you're a leader and you don't have access to that data, you should be worried. You're in a very dangerous place. I mean, it's the equivalent of being in a plane and flying it with no radar. And if you have your 3 or 4, Italy, they call them the consigliaries, the whisperers, if that's how you're relying on to go out and get you data and you think they're getting the full story, that's just silly. If you don't have a relationship with people where just accept that as an executive, the people there are far more qualified to make an assessment of your business than you are. And there's a rich source of insights. Doesn't mean they're always right or they're always complete, but among them, it's a thing about like a mosaic, right? Among that mosaic, there's all the truth you need. Now, if you don't want that truth, be honest about that. Saying, I don't want to know the truth. I want to live in my own story and be in denial and make the story sound like I wanted to. But at least be honest about the fact that you're deluding yourself. Don't try and convince all of them that your story is real. When you look so out of touch, you look so distant, and nobody can take you seriously. So if you're going to go into a region and really want to be a leader of the Asia Pacific region, then go be a leader of that region and learn the business, learn the role, figure out a real legitimate role for that business to play in the global portfolio of your company. And don't try and make it, if it's a North American company, you're not going to be North America. You're not. Don't try to be. Right? Yes. There's a specific set of customers or suppliers or technologies or partnerships that being in that region offers you. Exploit that. Leverage that. That's what you should be there for. And if you're involved in a bunch of other activities that make no sense, get rid of them. Stop that.
So coming to the region as a learner mindset, and I start to learn everything from scratch and rebuild your fit in for the region, right? But I'm curious because AI read you the dream zone on honest, right? Honesty is something that came out significantly for this, that led you write this book, right? What else? What is number 2 or number 3?
Yeah. Well, so governance. How we make decisions. Right? So if I walk into a room, commonly called a meeting, and I believe what's happening in that room is an honest presentation of data, a legitimate look at 2 sides of the story, and I believe my voice is welcome. I'm free to offer a different point of view. I'm free to disagree with the data. You're 3.5 times more likely to have people be honest. But if I walk into that room and I think it's just theater and orchestrated theater, and there's one side of a story being told by somebody very loud, nobody's disagreeing. I know there's a whole other side of a story that's not making it in the room. And the last thing I think you want is to hear from me a different point of view than what's prevailing. Now you're 3.5 times more likely to have people be dishonest, because now I have to get the truth somewhere else.
Wow.
The third was accountability. You never hear anybody say, "Oh, I'm so excited, it's my performance review." Right? People dread those moments. The systems that should be the most honoring and dignifying of people have become demeaning and demoralizing. When you talk about my contribution, if I believe that my contribution is being discussed and measured fairly and justly, meaning I have as much of a chance of success as anybody else here, and you are honoring my contribution, even when you have to tell me ways I have to improve, You're 4 times more likely to have people be dishonest. But if
Wow.
I feel like there's bias, if I feel like I'm not being honored, I'm a number in a box, I'm a form that you check off and send. You don't even know who I am. You don't even know why I'm here. You know, back in the last century, in the 80s and 90s, you know, even that recently, people's remit was separate from who they are, right? I had to close a number of claims, process a number of files, take a number of customer calls in the call center. That's not the case anymore. Repetitive work is no longer, I mean, even in the case of doing repetitive work, my remit is now my problem solving, my insight, my ideas, my ingenuity, my creativity. So the contribution and the contributor are more fused than ever. You can't say it's not personal because it's very personal. And if in the way you treat me, you understand that my contribution is a part of who I am, now you're 4 times more likely to have people be honest. And the last one was very surprising to us. It was cross-functional relationships.
Cross-functional relationships. I'm curious to hear that.
At the seams, right? So if marketing and operations, or marketing and sales, or R&D and North America, if at the intersections where, you know, that's where all the value is created in organizations. It's at the seams. No one function owns, or no one region owns a single remit. That creates a competitive distinction. If your competitive distinction is innovation, you know, that's marketing, R&D, and customer analytics, right? If your competitive distinction is technology, you know, that's might be customer analytics, digital, and IT. If at those seams people are connected, there's a way to resolve the natural tensions that are there. People can work through conflict in a healthy way. This was surprising to us. You're 6 times more likely to have people be honest.
Really?
Because now I have one story. I have one single source of truth. But if those silos are dueling, if there's rivalry at those seams, if there's we and they, you know, I mean, just think about who in your caller ID do you see on the phone and you think, what if they want? Or here they come. And remember, you're somebody's they too. Right? But if that's the case, now you're 6 times more likely to have people be dishonest, because now I've fragmented the organization, I fragmented the truth. So now I have dueling truths, and my goal isn't to find a single source of truth. My goal is to be right. In order to do that, I have to prove that you're wrong.
Yeah.
And that's the whole purpose of our relationship, is to be at war. The interesting thing about all those 4 dimensions is that they're cumulative. So if you can be good at all 4 of those things, you are 16 times more likely to have people be honest. And remember, honesty is not just defined by not lying. To be trustworthy, you have to say the right thing, do the right thing, and say and do the right thing for the right reason. Truth, justice, and purpose. But if you're not good at those 4 things, if you stink at all 4 of them, now you're 16 times more likely to find yourself in a newspaper headline story you never wanted to be in. Why would any leader want to insert that much risk? By a factor of 16, you're putting your business at risk. And those are all factors that are hiding in plain sight. We all have statements of identity. We all have governance systems of the way information and decision-making moves. We all have accountability systems, and we all have relationships across the enterprise. We have just come to believe that when those things don't work well, they're just nuisances, or that's just what a big company means. We've never understood before that there's real risk in those places if you don't attend to how people experience them.
Ron, a lot of leaders get into the leadership roles when they first started with the pure intention for goodness, for doing things right, and for collaboration. And somewhere along the line, things broke and make them separate. So if a leader would want to help them to steer back into the directions and make them great again, let's say like make America great again, now make a leader great again, how do we find the core to change them and then shifting that machine back to great again?
It's a fabulous question, Hal. Well, the first thing we need is data, right? So because most leaders, when they move the line, they move it slowly, and they don't realize, and they tell themselves a story in their head that it's not that bad. And unless they have calibration for how are people interpreting their motives, what stories are people telling them about their leadership, how are they being metabolized by others, they can't know. So we have to have a wake-up call. To say this is what's actually true about how others. It doesn't matter whether or not you intend it. It doesn't matter that you meant well. It doesn't matter that you had justification for that choice. It's all very interesting. This is the truth.
Okay.
And if this is not the story you want people telling about your leadership, we have to adjust it. But at least the data can tell us where to start.
Okay.
But if somebody waking up one morning and decides I have a bout of conscience now and I want to stop being bad, I want to be good, it's not likely to go very well because you've trained people to see you a certain way. And now to suddenly think they're going to be able to see you in a new light because you start changing your behavior. One of the biggest frustrations executives tell me when I'm working with them as a coach, when they have to, they've gotten some feedback, we have data that says you have to be more empowering or you have to be more inclusive. And they start doing that and nobody notices. And they get so frustrated, like, I'm changing my behavior and nobody sees it. I'm like, there's a lag time. There's months and months and months of lag time before people's eyes are trained to be able to see what you see. Secondly, what people don't bargain for, and what we do with our clients, is we make sure that the system is ready for this. When a leader changes his behavior, there's an automatic requirement of his team or her team. If I become more empowering, my team has to become more decisive.
So it has to go parallel.
If I become more inclusive, you have to show up with a voice. If I become more decisive, you have to act quicker. Nobody's bargaining for that. I'm all for you changing. I didn't sign up for me to change. And so what happens is as this new behavior starts to appear in the leader, the team resists because they realize, oh my gosh, this requires something of me. First, I have to decide if I trust it. Then I have to decide, can I produce the behavior it requires of me? So if he's being more inclusive, can I be decisive? Do I even know how to do that? I mean, I hated you being highly individual and never including me, but it was safe for me. I could hide. If I have to participate more, I'm going to be exposed more. I don't know if is that good? I don't know. And so we have to prepare the team to come along on the journey, because what happens is you get this resistance and the leader goes, what was the point of all this? They won't let me change, and they get discouraged. And if you're not preparing the team and the system for no leader can change their behavior in isolation. Even if you're just an angry barker of orders and you're harsh and you're mean, and we need to work on all that to get it all cleaned up so that you're more approachable and kinder and more accessible. And let's even say that you start producing those kinds of behaviors. People are not going to go, yes, she changed. They're going to go, what happened to her? This is weird. Because if you're nicer and kinder to me, now I have to talk to you in the elevator. Now I have to, when you stop on my cubicle and ask how I'm doing, I have to answer. And what if it doesn't last? Or what if I say the wrong thing? I mean, you're still not safe to me. You're trying to be safe to me, but I don't know that you are. And all those micro changes that have to happen when a leader shows up differently are important. That you have, as an executive coach, you have to prepare for those moments. Sometimes it's not. So, I told you early in my career, inside companies, I didn't do so well sometimes. Part of it was because when I got the data, I would see an insight. I would see a really important insight, and I would think, oh, I should share this insight, because I thought it was really profound. But what I didn't realize is that leader was maybe 4 months away from being able to hear it. That maybe there were 15 more conversations I had to have to prepare them to hear that insight. So sometimes when I get data, when I have a diagnosis, I can look at that leader and go, they're not ready for this. I have to get them ready for this moment. That could be 4 months away. Right? And if they hear it now, they'll shut down, or they'll get scared, or they'll get angry and throw me out, because they're just not ready. And so part of what I didn't know early in my career was you have to prepare people to hear and for the changes you're asking of them. You can't just blurt out, "Oh wow, everybody hates you."
Mm. So
And
you
I know
have to, so you have to understand the whole situation, what might be happen every step of the way, and prepare the people emotionally and physically, even for them to feel to get themselves ready, not just the leader but also the team, right? So
right,
that it creates a
absolutely.
harmony environment, and probably that's the reason why in our culture they say that the people from the inside, regardless of how well intended you are, and then if you go into a change situation like that, it's not gonna work. You have to invite the people from the outside to come in and provide the same advices, but the result will change, right?
Well, I think listen, I mean, people at the top of organizations are lonely. Right? We know that. We know they're isolated. We know they don't have safe places to trust. They have to take their anxieties. I get to sit with executives at their best and worst. I see them, their aspirations. I see their talents. I see their hopes. But I also see their addictions. I see their bad behavior. I see their struggling marriages. I see it all. And I have to hold all of that for them. But they have to keep a lot of that hidden. A lot of people, especially in cultures where you work, being authentic, being vulnerable is not valued as much. And so how do you help a leader be authentic in a culture that has a particular brand of authenticity that isn't, completely genuine? How do you help people find the courage to be more of
Wow.
who they are? Right? That's hard. And I may look at the data and realize I see how they've concocted you in their head. You're a monster under the bed. Now I see you and you're a good-hearted person. You're a great person. But that's not the side of you you're showing.
Mm.
So they don't know. You may think, why don't they see this part of me? And I may see because you're hiding it from them. You may think in your head you're being that person, but this is the mirror, this is the movie you're showing to them.
I see.
And
Wow.
it may take a long time to get you to trust that maybe that movie isn't serving you well anymore. But in your culture, you think showing this other side of you, or even part of it, is not right, is not good, couldn't possibly work. It's too threatening. They'll take advantage of me. I'll get hurt. They won't trust me anymore. They'll think I'm weak. And um, I have to help you work through all of that and get you in little chunks to realize that behind this wall of this movie, you think you're safe. It's the most dangerous place. It's the most dangerous place in an organization to be. You're isolated.
I see.
Out here, exposed, fully human, great and flawed, that's the safest place to be because now you have allies.
I see.
But in some cultures, like where you work, that's a big leap of faith.
I got it.
And I accept that. So my job isn't to convince you. My job is to help you and guide you to say, let's just take small steps. Let's just change little behaviors and work on certain things over time and see where we can get.
Does it mean that if I am built in a region where my belief, my culture enable me to be vulnerable, to show the honesty, and then if I shift onto a culture where, let's say, where you're not allowed to do it, or if you show any sign of that, it means you're a weak leader. I need to do a theater in front of my face, or what?
It's such a good question, and it's hard because the context matters, right? And so when you get to one of the hardest things we learned this in Rising to Power that most executives struggle with is that when you get to the top of a very senior level, there's 20 versions of you out there, right? People have concocted multiple versions of you out there, and you can't control that. Leaders get frustrated when they say, "Oh my gosh, they said Ron said, Ron said, Ron said, Ron said." I never said any of that. But they're going to make up that you did, or they're going to tell people that you did. It's part of the job. For a leader to be true to themselves, true to their values, true to who they are. Of course, you have different audiences, right? You can't be the same everywhere, but you can be consistent, right? There's a difference between consistency and 20 versions of you. And over time, that takes a degree of self-mastery to know What degree of authenticity will keep me true to my values and keep me trusted by this audience, or help me connect over time to this audience, right? And it's a gauge, and you have to constantly calibrate the words you say, the gestures you use, the questions you ask. But I do believe, Ha, that there are some universal truths about authenticity. People all over the world, regardless of what the culture is, people know if you care.
Yes.
They know if you're telling the truth. They know
Yes.
if you genuinely believe in what you're saying, or if it sounds like, corporate speak. People know these things. It doesn't matter what culture it is, right? And so
Yes.
my job is to help people find the universal
Key.
versions of themselves that can play in those contexts.
I see. Thank you. Ron, we asked for an hour and it is 3 minutes past the hour already. I will go to the last question with you for today. And so we would like to know if anything new on the horizon that you are planning to do, any exciting that come in you would want to share with us and the audience?
Well, we'll continue. I'm doing a couple of new courses for LinkedIn. So I have a new course on how to hold people accountable when you care, or how to care for people when you hold them accountable. Because most people think that they're opposites, right? If I care, I can't hold them accountable. If I hold them accountable, they think I don't care. So I'm doing a course on how to do both. And we also at Navalin, we built some new leadership programs. So we have ways that coming into organizations and helping develop cohorts of leaders and accelerate that leadership. So in 6 months or 8 months, we can get you 2 years of development by how we work with leaders and push them forward. If you're trying to grow a sector of your organization, we can get you the talent, the leadership talent you need. So we have new offerings there. Very exciting.
Thank you very much for sharing, for joining and sharing your story with us and the audience. And we appreciate it a lot, Ron. We wish you and the company and your families all well. And I look forward to a day that we meet you in person, and that would be wonderful.
I would love that, both of you too. And the best of luck to you as you try to bring new talent to Vietnam. I wish you all the best, and I hope that the leaders you work with are all very open and excited to be able to be helped by you.
Thank you very much.
All right,
Thank you so
take care.
much, Ron. Yeah.
Ron, can you stay in line with me for 1 second, please?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.